Commander Thelvas stood in the observation deck of his ship, staring at the viewing screen. Somewhere out there, in the darkness of space, was a vessel from a new species, a species that called themselves humans, a species from a planet named Earth. Thelvas had done this 73 times before. 73 different alien races. 73 successful first contacts. He knew the process well. It was simple. Really, he would reach out with his mind, touch the consciousness of one of these new aliens, and read their thoughts. Within minutes, he would know everything important. Were they peaceful? Were they dangerous? Could they be trusted? The mind never lied to a Velthari. His people had perfected this method over thousands of years. The Velthari Empire spread across half the galaxy, and every species they encountered was evaluated the same way. Mental contact first, physical contact only after the telepathic reading was complete and safe. "Commander, we have a stable lock on the human vessel," his assistant said. Her voice was calm and professional. This was routine work for everyone on the bridge. Thelvas nodded. He felt confident, perhaps too confident, but why shouldn't he be? 400 years of life. 400 years of experience. He was the best at what he did. The Empire sent him for the difficult cases, the strange ones, the dangerous ones. And every time, he succeeded. The human ship was called the Times Sejong Asterisk. It was small, primitive by Velthari standards. Their scans showed it held only 12 crew members. They were scientists, explorers. They had no weapons worth mentioning. They posed no military threat. But the Empire's rules were absolute. No exceptions. Know the mind before you meet the body. "Begin the connection protocol," Thelvas ordered. His crew worked quickly. They activated the telepathic amplifiers. The technology boosted his natural abilities, letting him reach across the vast distance of space. Without it, he would need to be much closer. With it, he could touch a mind from thousands of kilometers away. Target identified, the sensor officer reported. Adult male. Currently on the bridge of the human vessel. Biological readings show he is calm. Heart rate normal. Brain activity normal for his species. Thelvas settled into his meditation chair. It was designed for this purpose. Comfortable and supportive. He closed his eyes and began the mental exercises he had practiced for centuries. Breathing. Focusing. Opening his consciousness. The target was the ship's captain, a man named Kang Day. The records said he was 42 years old in Earth years. A xenobiologist. Someone who studied alien life. How fitting that this human who dreamed of meeting aliens would be the first one Thelvas contacted. Thelvas reached out with his mind. The telepathic amplifiers hummed softly, carrying his consciousness across the void. He could feel the connection forming. Like a bridge building itself, thought by thought, between two minds. When he touched alien minds, it always felt the same at first. A gentle pressure. A sense of presence. Then the mind would open, like layers peeling back. First came the basic instincts, the simple drives for food, safety, reproduction. Every species had these. They were the foundation. Above that came emotions. These varied more between species, but they followed patterns. Fear, curiosity, happiness, anger. Thelvas had learned to read emotional patterns quickly. On top of everything was conscious thought. This was the part that made each species unique. Some thought in images, some in sounds, some in concepts that had no Earth equivalent, but they were always organized, always structured. The mind was like a building, with each floor serving its purpose. Thelvas expected the same from Kang Day. He was very, very wrong. The moment he made full contact, Thelvas felt like he had been thrown into a whirlwind. No. Worse than that. A tornado. A hurricane. A storm of pure chaos. Kang Day's mind was not organized. It was not structured. It was not a building with neat floors. It was everything happening at once. Thelvas tried to find the bottom layer, the instincts. But there was no bottom. There was no top. There were no layers at all. There was only chaos. Day was thinking about ship navigation. The calculations filled part of his mind. But at the same time, he was also thinking about a song. An old song from his childhood. The melody played in his head even while he worked on navigation math, and he was thinking about his sister, Kang Bo. Had he sent her a message? He couldn't remember. He needed to check later. But later made him think about the schedule, which made him think about his second officer, Park Soo. He needed to talk to Soo about the mission parameters. They were approaching a nebula. It could be dangerous, or it could be fascinating, probably both. The thought of danger made Day imagine scenarios. What if they found aliens? What if first contact was today? What would he say? How would he act? His mind spun out dozens of imaginary conversations, each one different, each one happening simultaneously in his imagination, and underneath all of that, or above it, or maybe woven through it all, Day was hungry. His body wanted food. He was also mentally writing a grocery list, which made no sense because he was in space. He was remembering something embarrassing from 15 years ago for no reason. He was thinking about consciousness itself, about what it meant to think, about whether he was truly in control of his own thoughts, or just watching them happen. He made a joke in his head, a silly joke about the navigation computer. No one would ever hear it. But he found it funny anyway, and through all of this, his body continued working without his direct attention. His heart beat. His lungs breathed. His eyes focused and refocused. His hands held steady on the ship controls. All of this happened automatically, while his conscious mind spun in 1,000 directions. Thelvas tried to pull back, but the human mind came with him. Day had noticed the contact. He didn't know what it was, but he felt something. His consciousness turned toward Thelvas like a spotlight swinging in the dark. The human was trying to understand what was happening, trying to figure it out, creating new thoughts about the telepathic contact even as it occurred. And every thought split into more thoughts. Every idea contained its opposite. Day believed humans were insignificant in the vast universe. He also believed humans had unlimited potential. He held both thoughts at once without any conflict. He felt hope and cynicism together, confidence and doubt occupying the same space in his mind. Thelvas had spent 400 years reading minds. He had touched the consciousness of 73 different species. He had seen minds that thought in colors, in mathematics, in pheromone patterns. He had seen insect hive minds and gas giant philosophers. He had never seen anything like this. It was too much, too fast, too everything. Thelvas screamed. The sound came from his physical body, but it also echoed through his telepathic connection. A psychic shriek of pure overload. His crew members jumped in alarm. They had never heard their commander make such a sound. Thelvas's eyes rolled back. His body went rigid for one terrible moment. Then he collapsed in his chair, completely unconscious. The bridge erupted in chaos. Medical teams were called. The telepathic amplifiers were shut down. Crew members rushed to their commander's side. On the human ship times Sejong *, Captain Kang Dae blinked. He had felt something strange just now. A moment of dizziness. A sense of presence that vanished as quickly as it came. He shook his head and returned to his work, thinking about 17 different things at once. He had no idea what had just happened. He had no idea that he had just broken a telepathic master's mind simply by being himself. He had no idea that he had just changed the course of galactic history. He was just being human. And that, it turned out, was more than enough. Thelvas woke up 3 days later. He found himself in the medical bay, surrounded by equipment that monitored his vital signs. His head hurt. Actually, hurt was not the right word. His mind felt bruised, battered, like he had been in a physical fight. The medical staff rushed to his side when they saw his eyes open. They asked him questions. How did he feel? Did he know where he was? Could he remember what happened? Thelvas tried to speak, but no words came out. His mouth opened and closed, but his brain could not form the sounds. The doctors looked worried. They ran more tests. They scanned his brain. Everything looked normal, they said. Physically, he was fine, but Thelvas knew he was not fine. Something had changed inside him. Something had broken, and then healed wrong. It took hours before he could finally speak, and when he did, his voice was rough and quiet. "The human," he whispered. "The human mind." The doctors looked at each other. They did not understand. They had never seen a telepathic contact cause this kind of damage before. Thelvas was the strongest telepath in the Empire. If he could be hurt this badly, what did that mean? Word of the incident spread quickly through the Velthari Empire. The High Council demanded a full report. They gathered in their chamber, a vast room with seats arranged in circles. Hundreds of the most important Velthari waited to hear what Thelvas would say. He stood before them, still weak, still recovering. But they needed to know. They needed to understand what had happened. "The human mind is not like anything we have ever encountered," Thelvas began. His voice was stronger now, but it still shook when he spoke. "When I touched the captain's consciousness, I expected to find structure, order, layers of thought that I could examine one at a time." He paused, trying to find the right words. "There is no structure. There is no order. The human mind is a storm. It is chaos. They think about everything at once, not in sequence, but simultaneously. Multiple threads of thought, all happening together, all competing for attention." The council members made sounds of confusion. This did not match their understanding of how consciousness worked. "They hold contradictions," Thelvas continued. "A human can believe two opposite things at the same time without any conflict. They are aware of their own awareness. They think about thinking. Their memories are not stored properly. They change each time they are recalled. And through all of this chaos, they somehow function. They build ships. They explore space. They live normal lives." One of the council elders spoke up. Perhaps this one human was damaged. Perhaps his mind was sick or injured. Thelvas shook his head. "No. The biological scans showed normal brain activity for his species. This is not sickness. This is how humans are." Another council member asked the question everyone was thinking. "Are they dangerous?" Thelvas was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know. Their minds are unpredictable. They cannot be read in the traditional way. We cannot know their intentions through telepathy. This makes them dangerous by our standards. But whether they are aggressive or peaceful, I cannot say." The council debated for hours. Some argued that humans should be quarantined. Any species with minds that chaotic could not be trusted. They might act without reason. They might be violent and unpredictable. Others argued for caution. Perhaps the Velthari simply needed to develop new techniques. Perhaps with practice, they could learn to read human minds properly. Finally, a decision was made. They would try again. But this time, they would take precautions. Instead of one telepath, they would use 5. The mental load would be distributed, and they would use dampening technology to reduce the intensity of the contact. They would only read at 10% strength. Thelvas volunteered to be part of the second attempt, even though his doctors advised against it. He needed to know. He needed to understand. What were these humans? How did they live with such chaos in their heads? The target for the second attempt was carefully chosen. They picked Dr. Choi Na, the Times Sejong's Times chief engineer. The Velthari had been monitoring the human ship's communications. They had learned some of the human language. They knew that Choi Na was known for being calm and logical. If any human had an orderly mind, it would be her. 5 telepaths gathered in the meditation chamber. Thelvas was joined by 4 others, all experienced and powerful. They linked their minds together first, creating a group consciousness. This way, they could support each other, share the burden. The dampening field was activated. It would filter the connection, making it weaker but safer. They were only going to read at 10% strength. Surely that would be manageable. Together, the five minds reached out across space. They found the human ship. They found Choi Na. She was in the engineering section, working on some kind of machinery. The five telepaths made contact. It was still too much. Even at 10% strength, even with five minds working together, even with Dr. Choi Na's supposedly calm and logical brain, it was overwhelming. She was designing an engine modification. Her mind held complex calculations and three-dimensional models of machinery. But at the same time, she was replaying a conversation from that morning. She had talked with her wife, Yoon Ra, before starting her shift. The memory of Ra's smile made Na feel warm inside, even while she worked on cold equations. And she was planning. Ra's birthday was coming soon. Na wanted to do something special. But what? She considered dozens of options, comparing them, evaluating them, all while her hands worked on the physical machinery in front of her. There was a sound in Engineering Bay 3. A strange sound. Na noticed it with part of her mind. She made a mental note to check it later. But she did not stop her current work. She simply added it to the list of things to investigate. Memories bubbled up without warning. Na remembered being a child. She remembered her father's hands, rough and scarred, teaching her how to build circuits. The memory was vivid and emotional, even though it had nothing to do with her current task. At the same time, she was composing an angry message in her head. Some bureaucrat back on Earth had cut their mission funding. Na was furious. She mentally wrote a harsh response, knowing she would never actually send it. But it made her feel better to imagine telling that bureaucrat exactly what she thought. She was humming a tune from an old song. She did not consciously choose to hum. It just happened. Her mind provided background music while she worked. And then there was a random thought. Had she left the oven on at home? The thought made no sense. She was in space. She had been away from home for months. But her brain produced the worry anyway. Through all of this, she felt affection for her crew. Especially for young Hyun, the junior engineer who was always asking questions. She thought about how to teach Hyun better, how to help him grow. And underneath everything, that strange thing that Thelvas had noticed in Kangdae, the human was aware of her own thoughts. She was watching herself think. She knew her mind was wandering, and she was okay with it. She trusted herself to keep working even while part of her mind drifted. The five telepaths tried to hold on. They tried to organize what they were experiencing. But it was impossible. The human mind did not work in any way they understood. It was not a stream of consciousness. It was an ocean. It was a million streams all flowing together, mixing, separating, mixing again. One by one, the telepaths broke contact. One by one, they collapsed. Thelvas was the last to let go. Even as he felt his consciousness failing, he tried to understand. There had to be a pattern. There had to be some logic to this chaos, but there was not. Or if there was, it was so alien, so different, that his mind could not process it. He fell unconscious again. This time, when he woke, two of the other telepaths were still unconscious. They would not wake for another week. The damage to their minds was severe. The High Council was terrified now. If 5 of their strongest telepaths could not safely read a single human mind at reduced power, what did that mean? How could they possibly evaluate this species? How could they determine if humans were safe to contact? And a more disturbing question began to circulate among the Velthari. If all humans were like this, constantly experiencing such mental chaos, how were they even functional? How did they not go insane? What kind of species could survive with consciousness like that? The Velthari Empire had a problem. For the first time in their long history, they had encountered a species they could not read telepathically. This was not supposed to be possible. Their entire system of first contact relied on mental evaluation. Without it, they were working blind. The High Council ordered a full investigation. Scientists, psychologists, historians, and telepaths were all brought together. They formed study groups. They analyzed every piece of data from the 2 failed contact attempts. They tried to understand what made human consciousness so different. The answer, when it finally came together, was both simple and terrifying. Dr. Velkara, the Empire's leading xenopsychologist, presented her findings to the council. She was old, even by Velthari standards, and she had studied hundreds of alien species over her lifetime. But humans had puzzled her like nothing else. "We have been asking the wrong question," she told the assembled council. "We have been trying to understand why human minds are chaotic. But chaos is not the problem. Chaos is the solution." The council members looked confused. Velkara continued, "Earth is what we classify as a death world. Almost everything on their planet can kill them. Dangerous predators, poisonous plants, extreme weather, diseases. Humans are not the strongest species on their world. They are not the fastest. They do not have claws or armor or venom. But they survived anyway. How?" She brought up images on the display screen. Earth's wildlife. The creatures were horrifying. Some had massive teeth and claws. Others were small but deadly with poison. Humans evolved to think differently. Their ancestors needed to process multiple threats at the same time. A predator in front. A cliff behind. A storm approaching. Social dynamics in their group, food availability. All of these things had to be considered simultaneously to survive. She changed the image to show early humans hunting. They were persistence hunters. They would chase prey for hours, sometimes days, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. This required incredible mental flexibility. They had to track the animal, navigate terrain, manage their own energy, coordinate with their group, and imagine the future. Where will the prey go? What will it do? How do we intercept it? This kind of hunting required imagination, Velkara explained. They had to create scenarios in their minds. Possibilities that did not exist yet. This is where their creativity comes from. It is not art for art's sake, it is survival. She paused, letting the information sink in. The contradictions we observed are also survival tools. A human needs to believe they can succeed, or they will not try. But they also need to recognize when they might fail, or they will take foolish risks. So they believe both things. They are optimistic and cautious at the same time. They hold opposites in balance, and choose between them based on context. Another council member spoke up. But the chaos. The lack of structure. How can they function with thoughts happening randomly? Velkara smiled slightly. It is not random. It only appears that way to us. Human consciousness operates on parallel processing. Where we think in clear, linear sequences, they think in webs. Everything is connected. A smell can trigger a memory, which triggers an emotion, which triggers a thought about the future. It all flows together. She brought up brain scans of humans compared to Velthari. Look at the difference. Our brains are efficient. Information flows in organized pathways. Human brains are chaotic. Information jumps across their entire brain, but this gives them something we do not have. Flexibility. Adaptation. When circumstances change, we must rethink our entire approach. Humans simply shift their attention to a different thread of thought that is already running. 10. They are also self-aware in ways we are not, Velkara added. They think about thinking. They observe their own consciousness. This is why Commander Thelvas felt like the human mind turned toward him during contact. Because it did. The human noticed something was happening, and immediately began trying to understand it, creating new thoughts about the telepathic contact in real time. The council sat in silence, processing this information. One of the elder members finally spoke. "You are saying that humans are more mentally capable than we are." Velkara chose her words carefully. Different. Not better or worse, but different. Their minds can do things ours cannot. They can imagine things that do not exist. They can hold contradictions. They can process multiple complex problems simultaneously. This makes them creative, adaptive, and unpredictable. And dangerous? Another council member asked. Potentially, Velkara admitted. But also potentially valuable. Think of what humanity has accomplished. They reached space despite living on a death world. They developed advanced technology while dealing with constant internal conflicts. They create art, music, literature, philosophy. They do all of this while carrying that mental chaos every single moment of every single day. She emphasized the last point. Every human experiences what Commander Thelvas experienced as overwhelming chaos. Every moment of their lives. From birth to death. They think it is normal, because for them, it is. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Some members were fascinated. Others were disturbed. A few were frightened. They debated for days. What should be done about humanity? Some argued for quarantine. Humans were too unpredictable. Too alien. They could not be evaluated properly. The safest option was to avoid them entirely, put up warning beacons around their space, and leave them alone. Others argued for observation. Keep watching them from a distance. Study them without contact. Learn more before making any decisions. But Thelvas, still recovering from his second encounter with human consciousness, proposed something different. He stood before the council again, looking tired but determined. We have been trying to read human minds because that is how we always make first contact. But perhaps we need to change. Perhaps we need to meet them the way primitive species meet each other. In person, with words and gestures. Without telepathy. The council reacted with shock. Meet aliens without reading them first? It went against everything the Empire had done for thousands of years. It is too dangerous, one council member said. Is it? Thelvas asked. We know humans have no major weapons. We know they are explorers and scientists, not warriors. We have been monitoring their communications. They seem curious and peaceful. At least in this vessel. Why not simply ask them if they want to meet? Because we cannot trust what they say, another member argued. Without reading their minds, how do we know they are telling the truth? We do what species without telepathy do, Thelvas replied. We observe their actions. We listen to their words. We build trust over time. Is it perfect? No. But trying to force telepathy on them clearly does not work. Velkara supported Thelvas's position. I agree. Human minds are not hiding anything from us. They are simply too complex for our telepathy to handle. It is like trying to read a book while being thrown around in a storm. The information is there. We just cannot process it. Meeting them physically might be the only viable option. The debate continued for weeks. The council was split. This was an unprecedented situation, and there was no clear right answer. Finally, a compromise was reached. They would attempt physical contact, but carefully. A small diplomatic team would approach the human ship openly. They would send a message first, explaining what had happened. An apology for the telepathic contact attempts, an invitation to meet properly. If the humans agreed, both sides would meet in a neutral location. No telepathy would be used without explicit human permission. It was risky. It was uncomfortable. It went against Velthari tradition. But it was the only way forward. Thelvas was chosen to lead the diplomatic mission. Despite his injuries, or perhaps because of them, he was the right choice. He understood humans better than anyone else in the Empire, even if that understanding came from being overwhelmed by their consciousness. Preparations began. The Velthari studied human languages, human culture, human history. Everything they could learn from monitoring communications and observing from a distance, and they prepared themselves mentally for something extraordinary. They were about to meet a species whose consciousness was so powerful, so complex, that it broke telepaths. They were about to have first contact with humanity, not as telepaths evaluating primitives, but as equals meeting equals. For the first time in the Empire's long history, the Velthari were nervous about first contact. And that nervousness, that uncertainty, was perhaps the most important lesson humans had already taught them. Not everything can be known in advance. Sometimes, you have to take a risk. 6 months had passed since Thelvas first touched Kangday's mind. 6 months of study, debate, and preparation. The Velthari diplomatic ship, called the Times Harmonious Dawn *, approached human space carefully and openly. They made no attempt to hide. They wanted the humans to see them coming. On the bridge of the Times Sejong asterisk, alarms started beeping. Sensor Officer Lim detected an unknown vessel approaching their position. He called Captain Kang Dae to the bridge immediately. Dae arrived quickly, his mind already spinning through possibilities. First contact? Pirates? A malfunction? His crew gathered around the sensor displays. "It is not like anything in our databases," Lim reported. "The design is completely alien." "But Captain, they are broadcasting a signal. It is using our language. Earth standard." Everyone on the bridge looked at each other. This was it. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries. Alien contact. "Play the message," Dae ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. The message came through the speakers. The voice was strange, clearly artificial, a computer attempting to speak human language. But the words were understandable. "Human vessel times Sejong asterisk. We are the Velthari. We come in peace. We attempted to contact you 6 months ago using telepathy. We were unprepared for your consciousness. We apologize. We wish to meet you properly. If you are willing, we mean no harm." The bridge was silent. Everyone was processing what they had just heard. Telepathy? 6 months ago? Dae remembered that moment. The dizziness, the strange feeling of being watched. It had lasted only a second. He had thought nothing of it at the time. "They tried to read our minds?" Dr. Choi Na said quietly. She had also felt something 6 months ago. A brief moment of disorientation while working in the engineering bay, and apparently failed, Dae said. He felt a mix of emotions. Violation, because they had tried without asking. Curiosity, because it had failed. Excitement, because this was first contact. Fear, because this was first contact. His mind spun through scenarios. Should they respond? What should they say? Was this a trap? Were the aliens dangerous? But if they wanted to harm the Times Sejong asterisk, they could probably do it easily. The alien ship was clearly more advanced. Send a response, Dae decided. Tell them we are willing to meet. Choi Na looked concerned. Captain, we should report this to Earth Command first. By the time we hear back from Earth, this opportunity might be gone, Dae replied. We are first contact specialists. This is literally what we came out here to do. He was right. The Times, Sejong Times, had been sent to explore the frontier specifically because Earth wanted to be ready if they found alien life. The crew had trained for this scenario. They composed a careful response and sent it to the alien ship. Within hours, arrangements were made. The Velthari would send a small shuttle to dock with the Times Sejong asterisk. Both sides agreed to limits. Only 5 Velthari would come aboard. No weapons, no telepathy without permission. The Times Sejong Times crew prepared frantically. They cleaned the docking bay. They set up a meeting room. They prepared medical supplies in case the aliens had different atmospheric needs. They were nervous and excited and terrified all at once. Dae chose a small team to meet the aliens first. Himself, Choi Na, and Park Soo. 3 humans to meet 5 aliens. It seemed fair. The Velthari shuttle docked smoothly. The airlock cycled. The door opened. The aliens were tall and thin, with skin that shifted colors slowly like oil on water. They had large eyes, no visible nose, and long fingers. They moved gracefully, almost floating. Thelvas was in front. He wore a device around his neck that translated his speech into human language. Captain Kang Dae, he said, and his voice through the translator was calm and polite. Thank you for agreeing to meet us. Dae stepped forward and extended his hand, a human gesture of greeting. Thelvas looked at the hand for a moment, then carefully reached out and grasped it. The alien's skin was cool and smooth. Welcome to the Times Sejong asterisk, Dae said. Though I admit, I am not sure what the protocol is for meeting telepathic aliens who already tried to read my mind. It was a blunt statement, perhaps too blunt, But Day believed in honesty. Thelvas's skin colors shifted, a pattern that might have been embarrassment. I apologize again for that. We did not understand what we were attempting. Your minds are extraordinary, beyond our ability to read safely. They moved to the meeting room. Both sides sat down, facing each other across a table. It was awkward. Neither species knew the other's customs or social rules. But they tried. Can you explain what happened? Day asked. 6 months ago. What did you experience? Thelvas considered his words carefully. When I touched your consciousness, I expected to find an organized mind. Layers of thought that I could examine carefully. Instead, I found chaos. Beautiful, terrible chaos. You were thinking about dozens of things simultaneously. Your thoughts branched and connected in ways I could not follow. It was overwhelming. He paused. I screamed and lost consciousness. It took me 3 days to wake up. Choi Na leaned forward. But that is just normal thinking. That is how we always are. I know, Thelvas said quietly. That is what terrifies us. What you experience as normal would break our minds. We cannot comprehend how you function with such constant mental activity. Park Soo spoke up for the first time. Are all your people telepathic? Can you all read minds? Most can, to some degree. Another Velthari, named Kelris, answered. It is how we communicate most important information. Speech is for simple things. Telepathy is for deep understanding. Then you must find us very confusing, Day said. Confusing, fascinating, frightening, Thelvas admitted. We have encountered 73 species before yours. We understood all of them quickly. You are the first we may never fully understand. There was a long silence. Both sides absorbed this information. Finally, Choi Na asked the question everyone was thinking. What happens now? Are you going to tell other aliens about us? Are we considered dangerous? Thelvas was honest. The High Council debated this for weeks. Some wanted to quarantine your species. Keep you isolated until we understand you better. Others wanted to observe from a distance. Some even suggested ignoring you entirely. And what did you decide? Day asked, his heart beating faster. We decided to do what we should have done from the beginning. Ask you what you want. Meet you as equals, not as subjects to be evaluated. Relief flooded through the human crew members. This could have gone very differently. The aliens could have declared humanity too dangerous to contact. Instead, they were offering respect. We want to learn from you, Thelvas continued. How do you live with such active minds? How do you create art and technology while experiencing constant mental chaos? How do you build civilizations when every individual experiences consciousness so differently from us? Day laughed, a very human sound that made the Velthari's skin patterns shift in surprise. You think we have it figured out? Day said. We do not. We are all just pretending we know what we are doing. Every human is navigating their own mental storm every day. We developed meditation, therapy, art, philosophy, all kinds of tools to help. But honestly, we are still figuring it out. Choi Na nodded. It is strange hearing you describe our minds as overwhelming. From the inside, it feels normal. But yes, it can be exhausting. Sometimes I wish I could think about just one thing at a time. And yet you accomplish so much, Kelris said with what might have been admiration. You reached space from a death world. You explore the unknown. You create beauty and meaning from chaos. We do our best, Park Soo said simply. The meeting continued for hours. Both sides shared information carefully. The Velthari learned about human history, culture, and biology. The humans learned about the Velthari Empire, telepathy, and galactic civilization. It was awkward at times. There were misunderstandings. The translator made mistakes. Cultural differences caused confusion. But both sides persisted. As the meeting was ending, Thelvas made a formal proposal. The Velthari Empire would like to establish diplomatic relations with humanity. We will never use telepathy on humans without explicit permission. We will share information about the galaxy and other species. We will offer trade and cultural exchange. And we will protect your species' rights in galactic law. Day looked at his crew members. This was bigger than him. This was a decision for all humanity. But someone had to start the process. On behalf of the crew of the Times, Sejong Times, and the United Earth Government, I accept your proposal in principle. Though final decisions will need to come from our leaders back home, they shook hands again, human and alien together. It was historic. It was momentous. It was also slightly awkward. Because neither side was sure what came next, but it was a beginning. And sometimes, a beginning is enough. The news spread across Earth like wildfire. First contact. Aliens were real. The Velthari Empire existed. Humanity was not alone in the universe. The initial meeting between the Times Sejong Times and the Times Harmonious Dawn Times was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, more ships arrived. Human vessels from Earth. Velthari diplomatic ships from across the Empire. A small space station was set up at a neutral location where both species could meet safely. Kang Dae found himself famous overnight. He was the first human to shake hands with an alien. His face was on every news broadcast. People wanted to hear his story over and over. But Dae tried to stay focused on the important work. Building a real relationship between two very different species. The meetings continued. Diplomats, scientists, and cultural experts from both sides gathered to work out the details. There were problems, of course. Misunderstandings happened daily. Human humor often confused the Velthari. Velthari customs seemed strange to humans, but both sides worked through the difficulties with patience. One of the most important agreements was about telepathy. The Velthari formally promised never to read human minds without clear, informed consent. This was written into every treaty and agreement. Humans had the right to privacy in their own thoughts. Some humans volunteered to let Velthari telepaths try to read them under controlled conditions. Scientists wanted to understand the process better. The results were always the same. Even the strongest Velthari telepaths could not handle human consciousness for more than a few seconds. It was simply too much. Dr. Choi Na became involved in a fascinating research project. She worked with Velthari scientists to compare human and Velthari technology. The differences were surprising. Velthari technology was elegant and efficient, but it followed very linear design principles. Human technology was often messy and complicated, with multiple backup systems and creative workarounds. Your engineering reflects your minds, one Velthari scientist told Choi Na. Everything is interconnected. Multiple solutions for every problem. It is chaotic, but it works. Thank you, I think. Choi Na replied with a smile. Back on Earth, the philosophical implications of first contact were being debated everywhere. What did it mean that human minds were too complex for telepathy? Some people felt proud. Humans were special, unique. Others felt concerned. Were humans somehow damaged or wrong? Park Soo, who had returned to Earth for a series of lectures, addressed this concern during a university talk. We are not better than the Velthari, he explained to the crowd. We are not worse. We are different. They have abilities we do not have. They can communicate directly. Mind to mind. That is amazing. We have abilities they do not have. We can imagine in ways that overwhelm them. That is also amazing. Both are valid ways to experience consciousness. Remember. 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 The Velthari began sharing information about the galaxy. There were other species out there. Lots of them. The galaxy was full of life. Humans were newcomers to a very crowded neighborhood. Some of these species were friendly. Others were neutral. A few were dangerous. The Velthari helped humanity understand galactic politics and prepare for other contacts that would inevitably come. 1 year after first contact, a major celebration was held. Both species gathered at the neutral space station for a ceremony. Formal treaties were signed. Trade agreements were established. Cultural exchange programs were created. Ambassador Thelvas, who had recovered fully from his encounters with human minds, gave a speech at the ceremony. His translator carried his words to the assembled crowd, human and Velthari together. When I first touched a human mind, I thought I had encountered something broken. Something wrong. I could not have been more mistaken. Human consciousness is not broken. It is powerful. It is creative. It is extraordinary. He paused, his skin shifting through colors that indicated deep emotion. We Velthari have dominated this galaxy for thousands of years. We believed we understood consciousness. We believed our way was the only way. Humanity has taught us humility. There are types of minds we cannot read, types of consciousness we cannot fully comprehend. And that is wonderful. The universe is more diverse, more complex, more interesting than we ever knew. The audience applauded, a human gesture that the Velthari had learned to appreciate. Kang Day also spoke at the ceremony. He kept his words simple and honest. A year ago, my crew and I were alone in a small ship, exploring the edge of known space. We hoped to find alien life, but we never truly expected it. Now, we are part of something larger, the galactic community. It is exciting and overwhelming and sometimes confusing. But we are grateful. He looked at the Velthari delegation. Thank you for giving us a chance. Thank you for meeting us as equals. Thank you for teaching us that being different is not being wrong. After the formal ceremony, there was a celebration. Humans and Velthari mingled, trying each other's food and drinks, sharing stories and songs. It was awkward and messy and perfect. Choi Na stood with her wife, Yoon Ra, who had come up to the station for the celebration. They watched the crowd together. It is strange, Ra said quietly. A year ago, we thought we were alone. Now look at this. I know, Choi Na replied. Everything is different now. Are you scared? Ra asked. Choi Na thought about it. She was thinking about 17 different things at once, as always. The future, the past, possibilities and dangers and hopes and fears. But through all the chaos in her mind, she found a clear answer. No, I am excited. There is so much to learn, so much to discover. Yes, there will be challenges, but there will also be wonders. Across the room, Park Soo was attempting to explain the concept of music to a group of confused Velthari. It was not going well, but everyone was laughing. Thelva stood at the edge of the celebration, observing. A human approached him. It was Lim, the censor officer from the Times Sejong **. Ambassador Thelvas, Lim said politely. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever regret trying to read our minds? It hurt you. It could have gone very wrong. Thelvas considered the question carefully. His skin shifted through several colors before he answered. No, I do not regret it. Yes, it was painful. Yes, it taught us that we are not as powerful as we believed. But it also led us here. To this moment. To this friendship between our species. Pain is not always bad if it leads to growth. That is very philosophical, Lim said with a smile. I have had a year to think about it, Thelvas replied. And unlike you, humans, I can only think about one thing at a time. They both laughed at that. As the celebration continued, ships from both species orbited nearby. Humans and Velthari working together, learning from each other, building something new. 50 years later, Ambassador Thelvas would write a book about human consciousness. It would become required reading in the Velthari Empire. In it, he would describe his first contact with Kang Day. The moment that changed everything. The final chapter of his book was titled, The Beauty of Chaos. In it, he wrote, human minds cannot be read by telepathy. This is not a weakness. It is not a defense. It is simply a result of what they are. Humans think in ways that exceed our ability to process. Their consciousness is a storm of thoughts, emotions, memories, and imagination, all happening at once. To them, this is normal. To us, it is overwhelming. We may never fully understand how they function, but we have learned to appreciate what they accomplish despite, or perhaps because of, their mental complexity. humanity has taught the galaxy an important lesson. Consciousness is not one thing. It is not a single path that all minds must follow. It is infinite in its variety. The human storm is just one example of how differently minds can work. And that difference is not a flaw. It is a gift. We are honored to know them. We are privileged to learn from them. And we are grateful that they have chosen to share their chaos with us. They are beautifully, impossibly, wonderfully human. And the galaxy is better for it. Back at the celebration, Kang Day stood looking out at the stars through the station's observation window. His mind was, as always, thinking about 17 things at once. The future of humanity. The meaning of consciousness. What he would have for dinner. A joke someone told earlier. His sister back on Earth. The strange beauty of the nebula in the distance. Whether he had responded to that email. The taste of the alien drink he had just tried. The warmth of the room. The history they were making. The responsibility he felt. The excitement. The fear. The hope. All of it at once. All of it normal. All of it human. And somewhere in that chaos, a single clear thought emerged. We are not alone anymore. It was a good thought. Perhaps the best thought. And Kang Day held on to it, while his mind spun on to consider 1,000 other things, because that is what humans do. They hold on to the important things while navigating the chaos. They find meaning in the storm. They create beauty from confusion. They survive. They grow. They reach for the stars. And now, thanks to one failed telepathic contact and one successful handshake, they do it as part of a larger galactic community. The human story was just beginning. And the galaxy was watching with fascination to see what humanity would do next. Because if there was one thing the Velthari had learned, it was this. Never underestimate the species whose minds are too powerful to read. They might just change everything.